Welcome to AARP, Arizona Hispanic Connection. Educate. Celebrate. Connect. Arizona Hispanic Connection.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning. This is AARP, Arizona Hispanic Connection. This is David Parra with AARP, and today we have another very, very special program. The name of the program is Democracy, Civic Engagement. And one of the first points that I would like us to touch today in this amazing subject is, how did we get here? You know, today I believe we enjoy the concepts of democracy, but democracy has gone through a long, long process, centuries, I would say, wars, fightings, bloodsheds, and it's gone through a lot of things, a big process. Progress is being made gradually, and that's what we would like to do today, try to understand that process. But more than that is bring it home. How did we get here? And then what is civic engagement today? We have such a big privilege of engaging, participating in civic issues. And that was thanks to the whole process of this democracy being shaped, formed, and in the process of being perfected. We have three guests today. We have Judge Ed Butler from Texas. He's joining by phone. We have Adrian Fontes. He is a Maricopa County recorder. And then we have Isela Blank. She is a representative of the Arizona Legislature. And we're going to get to them in just a bit. I want to do two things before that, and that is I'm going to read a couple of paragraphs, small ones, and then I'm going to go to Judge Ed Butler. And what I would like to read is the Preamble of Our Constitution, just a small paragraph, and then the Declaration of Independence, because these paragraphs are amazing. And again, how did we get here? Was this has this always been like that? I don't think so. So it's taken a long process. But this is how it reads. The preamble reads, "We the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, do ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States of America." Again, these words were not just, someone just didn't have a dream and about these words. These words have been, have gone through a long, long process. The Declaration of Independence reads, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness." So these are just a couple of paragraphs that to me summarize centuries upon centuries of debates, progress, wars, fightings, to come to declare these words. This was declared at a point where a new country was being formed, and it was basically declaring it to the country from which it was taking its independence from. So, Judge Ed Butler, are you there? You're in Texas, correct?
Yes, sir.
Thank you for joining in. I got your bio, and it would take us a few minutes to read. So instead of doing that, would you mind using perhaps 1 minute to tell us the highlights, what you consider the highlights of your career? I understand you are a retired judge, correct?
Yes.
Take it away.
All right. Well, David, thank you for allowing me to be on your show. 1 minute. You timed me. I obtained a law degree from Vanderbilt University. As a trial lawyer, I became board certified as a civil trial lawyer. I served as a judge at the city, county, state, and federal levels. I'm an author of 12 books. 2 of them are award winners, and I think the Hispanics in your audience should be interested because it shows that Spain, New Spain, Bernardo Galvez played a vital role in getting America's independence and democracy. I'm a former professor of law and adjunct professor of government and constitutional law, a frequent speaker. I'm past President General of the Sons of the American Revolution. I founded the Order of the Founders of North America, and my Galvez books are available on Amazon.com. 59 seconds.
Well, that was great. Now, who asked you to write that book about Spain's contributions to in the United States?
The King of Spain, His Royal Highness Felipe VI de Bourbon.
You mean he literally asked you to write that book?
He not only asked me to write the book, but he's got his forefinger punching on my chest. This guy's like 6'8". He's very handsome, strikingly so. And he asked me not only to write the book, but to write a screenplay. And he wants Hollywood to do a movie, and he wants Antonio Banderas to play the part of Bernardo Galvez.
Wow! And I have comedy recorder Adrian Fontes and Representative Isela Blanc. And please feel free if you want to jump in the conversation, make comments by all means.
I do. Judge Adrian Fontes here. Very interesting. Most people don't know why Galveston is named Galveston, and it's after this very character that
In
you
Texas,
are expert
correct?
in.
Yes.
That's great. He received letters of appreciation from George Washington and Patrick Henry, from Thomas Jefferson, and General George Rogers Clark said his battles in the West would not have been won without the support of Bernardo Galvez sending him supplies up the river. And what most people don't recognize is that Spain was just as big a sponsor of the American Revolution as France.
As a matter of fact, Judge, isn't it true that the first coin of the United States of America as a recognized monetary unit was the Spanish real?
Exactly. I wrote an article that's published called "The First American Gold Dollar Was a Spanish Coin."
Yeah.
And by law, it was recognized as legal tender.
Yeah. Judge, the next time you come to Phoenix, please let me know. We would like to do some interviews of you. I mean, just from what I read.
I want to have a beer with this guy.
Oh, of course. Oh, you have a beer. I want to have an interview. You have a beer.
We'll
why
have a beer
not? I'll
after the
take one too if he
We'll
comes. Well, before we ask you that important question about the history of democracy, Judge, I understand that you went to the same high school that Elvis Presley did. We probably lost him just for a bit. While we get him on the phone, isn't that amazing? That he was asked to write this book about Spain's contributions.
I think it's fantastic, and I think it's one of the most important parts of American history that gets ignored, by so many people. The West was actually won far before any Europeans showed up, and then it was won by a European country that didn't speak English. And the idea of democracy and self-determination of people had to work even in the Spanish frontier. Because folks had to make decisions, right? I mean, I think that's what you're really talking about here with democracy.
And thank you for that. And we'll continue that conversation. Sure. Judge, are you there?
I'm back, I think.
Yeah, we have you. We can hear you now. So, Judge, I understand that you went to the same high school as Elvis Presley. Is that correct?
Yeah, I played in the band with him. We used to watch girls together.
All right, so let's get to the meat of this conversation. Would you help us to walk us through this process of democracy from its historic context? I've done a lot of research this past few days, and it is unbelievable the process that got us to where we are today. Today we read the preamble and the Declaration of Independence looks so easy, this and that, but it's taken a lot of work, hasn't it?
Well, let me just say this. Our founding fathers were scholars. There was no TV or radio to occupy their time back in those days. And so they read a lot, and they read history and philosophy. And democracy began, I believe, with the discussions of Plato and Socrates in ancient Greek. And the Romans actually put the concept of democracy to work, because Roman senators were democratically elected, and the citizens had the duty to pay taxes, and they had the right to vote and to own property. And you can't have democracy, in my opinion, true democracy, without freedom.
Right.
So the next major development, I think, was when Emperor Charlemagne, who was crowned Emperor of the Holy Roman Empire on Christmas Day of the year 800, he created a working government, and he codified unwritten laws. So here again, democracy is based on freedom, and freedom comes through laws that are enforced properly.
You know, its basic concept in a very, very individual aspect. Could you say, because, you know, history tells us that at one point people just declare that God had called them, and I'm the king and you listen. But so somebody had to think a lot and dare to express what they were thinking about, how the concept of citizen, you know, the concept that all men have rights, all men can say what they want, what they think, can debate. That was a huge.
It was a gradual process.
Right.
William the Conqueror, when he conquered England in 1066, he gave certain rights to English citizens under the doctrine of manorialism. They enjoyed fundamental rights that were not enjoyed by other Europeans, and under him, England developed a common law. And that common law included a trial by jury, protection from unlawful entry by law enforcement, and no taxation without consent. The English system developed a Lord High Chancellor, and the Chancellor had not only the right to apply the law to a certain set of facts, but he was the holder of the king's conscience, and he could do equity. And anybody who's ever studied law, you know that there are two separate sets of rules, unfortunately. And now our federal courts sit as judges of law and equity. But the big deal, I think, was the Magna Carta in 1215, at which time the barons, 24 Runnymede barons, with the support of the church, forced King John to grant certain rights and to limit government. And that was the main thing back in that days, limiting government. And so our founding fathers took a lot of the rights out of the Magna Carta and put them in our Declaration of Independence.
So it is correct to think that, again, the founding fathers had read and were very familiar with all the process of democracy from centuries back, and it was evolving until they, were able to declare these marvelous words in the Preamble and the Declaration of Independence.
David, let me mention something that your Hispanic audience will appreciate. We're talking about the development of the 13 colonies, the English colonies.
Right.
But under the theory of manifest destiny, we bought the Louisiana Purchase, and we started moving westward. We incorporated the Louisiana Purchase. We incorporated Texas, Arizona, New Mexico, and California. And they had existing Spanish laws, but those became, and there's still some effects of those Spanish laws in all of the former Spanish territories. But that's where Spanish law became part of our common law that's developed in this country.
Right. Judge, we're going to have to go on a break, and I had said to just keep you for one segment. Would you mind staying on the line? We'll keep you for a couple more minutes after the break. Is that okay?
No hay problema.
Thank you. This is AARP, Arizona Hispanic Connection. We'll be right back.
Welcome to AARP, Arizona Hispanic Connection. Educate. Celebrate. Connect. Arizona Hispanic Connection.
We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with a certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. These are words from the Declaration of Independence. And we are talking about democracy, civic engagement. We have Judge Ed Butler, Adrian Fontes, and he's our Maricopa County Recorder, and Isela Blank, a representative here in Arizona. So just to complete our conversation with Judge, so Judge Ed, again, thank you so much for helping us to review that the Constitution, the democracy aspects that we enjoy today are linked to a long, long history, correct?
Yeah, and let me just add this, David, if I may, because we have a Hispanic audience. Hispanics played a vital role in the obtaining of democracy.
Right.
And that was through Bernardo Galvez, and he fought the British. His Spanish troops fought the British in Arkansas, Missouri, Illinois, and Michigan, and along the Gulf Coast in Mobile and Pensacola. And he had more Spanish troops in Pensacola than George Washington had in the Continental Army. So, you know, Hispanics can hold their head high that their ancestors played a vital role in our democracy.
Definitely. Well, Judge Ed, anything that you want to add? It's been great. And again, please do let us know if you come this way one of these days to Phoenix. And you already heard County Recorder Adrian Fontes, and I would like to meet with you. And he said to drink a beer. I may join you, but at least I want to do some interviews of you.
Well, next time I'm out there, I'll give you a holler.
Please do, and thank you so much for joining us.
My book on Galvez is available on Amazon.com.
Perfect, definitely. Now, did you already give the website to the audience where you have information about you?
Well, it's under it's being worked on right now.
Okay.
But the website is southwesthistoricpress.com.
Thank you. Thank you so much, and we'll stay in touch.
All right.
And by the way, I just want to say that Mimi Lozano, an amazing person that I have the privilege of being in touch with from California, she helped me get a hold of you. So thanks to Mimi. She most likely will be here in the program later on. So thanks to Mimi Lozano. Thank you, Judge Ed Butler from Texas.
El gusto es mío.
Take care. Any impressions before we jump into the more local aspects of democracy and civic engagement? I think it's amazing just to recognize that democracy has a long history.
So I just want to, I thank you. I learned so much. It's that reminder that, as you were saying, that this didn't just suddenly happen in 1776, right? That this had been an evolving process. But I think it's also important to, for me, it's really important because as an immigrant, in pursuit of, liberty and all these wonderful things and what this democracy really means to new Americans. And so I think it's also important to just kind of yellow highlight that, right? Because there's a reason people come to the United States. And I think for me personally, it's even just an important reminder, especially with what has happened in the last, few months, but definitely the last week, where we have, where we're changing what the U.S. has stood for, for immigrants. So I just wanted to add that.
No, and it's I've been thinking a lot about this subject, and I was thinking about you, Representative Blank, and then obviously you, County Recorder Adrian, because you are Latinos, you are Hispanics, and you are a perfect example of civic engagement. Yeah. You are the Latinos who went to school, who got educated, and you went into you prepare yourselves and you run for office and you won. So this is part of another aspect of this show is to celebrate. And I just want to tell you that we celebrate your accomplishments and thank you for representing our community. I mean, I understand, Representative Blank, that you at one point were a dreamer, correct?
Yeah, I was undocumented
Yes.
for.
And now you're a representative.
Yeah, I know. And
A legislator.
No,
Come
it's
on.
crazy. No, what's crazy is when I first moved to Arizona for a few short months, I lived just 2 blocks west of the state capitol.
Wow.
And I went to Capitol Elementary. And that, to me, if you had told me as a 10-year-old girl, I won't say how many years ago, but many years ago, that I would actually be sitting in the state capitol as a state representative, I would have said you were...
out of your mind.
Yeah,
kind of
absolutely.
thing.
Yeah, so as a former undocumented person, in a time like now, in a state like Arizona,
Right.
talking about civic engagement...
Well, I mean, the thing that I think that speaks to really more than anything else is the idea that A, the dream's not dead, B, the opportunities have not been quashed, C, an individual's capacity and willingness to work still means something, right? And then D, if you don't act on those movements within, right? If you don't take that spark and turn it into a fire, it's not going to go anywhere. You're going to fail, right? And this is kind of really what this... not just this country, but the idea of democracy has always been about. I mean, at its core, democracy is just a methodology for making decisions. It's nothing more than that. You know, you could put all of the decisions into one person. You can have a committee of 3, but all of a sudden, when it's more than just one person, you have, all right, a group of folks that are determining either for themselves or for larger groups. So the idea behind group decision making has existed since the times of cavemen and women and folks running around on the Serengeti and all that.
The
stuff.
concepts of democracy have been there.
It's the way we do it, right? So we've made it a little more technical. We're using it for a whole heck of a lot more people. I mean, Maricopa County's got 2.2 million registered voters in it. We're shooting for 3 million. By the way, folks, if you're not registered, get out there.
And you know,
get out there and register.
let's get into that subject on the third segment. But why don't we use the remaining 5 minutes of this segment to tell us a little bit more about yourself? Who, your beginnings. Where are you from?
Oh, sure.
And just tell us how you got to be the county recorder.
Well, I got angry and I ran and I won. So that's that part real fast.
Now, are you from Nogales?
I grew up down on the Mexican border. Yeah, I was born at St. Joseph's Hospital. I just lucked out I was on this side of the border and not the other side because that community, back then the fence didn't really matter, right?
Okay. Really?
Oh, no. It was.
What year is this?
Well, I was born in 1970. I guess as a man, I can't be shy about my age, I suppose. But back in 1970, the border was a chain link fence that went for half a mile in either direction from the border checkpoint.
So coming in and out was not a big deal?
There was no such thing as in and out.
Really?
It was an irrelevancy.
In the 70s?
Well, yeah, because the border, the international border in Nogales was like the border between, Phoenix and Tempe, right? It was a little inconvenient. Right. And we've morphed. I mean, talk about where we were as a nation and how we saw our neighbors to the south truly as neighbors and partners.
Stay with you. I know you want to talk about. Stay with you. We want to know more about you.
I grew up in Nogales.
Because you're a Latino, and we want to celebrate your accomplishments because you are the county recorder and you are a legislator. Come on.
So I grew up on those streets, back and forth over the border, and my first language was Spanish, and we used to have weddings on one side of the border and the reception on the other side of the border. It wasn't but a thing, and that's kind of the attitude that I grew up with about the border. It was very friendly. So after high school, I went to college, and I was at Arizona State, and I had about as much fun as a Sun Devil can have, and so I had to leave. And then I went and enlisted in the United States Marine Corps, and I got myself straightened out. And I really learned.
That helps you a lot, huh?
No, it helped a lot. Well, see, here's the thing: when you enlist in the Marine Corps, you can pick one of 3, right? Overseas, East Coast, West Coast. I wanted to go overseas to get away from town, and I wanted to go maybe to the East Coast to see something new. And then West Coast was my third choice. And of course, I ended up getting stationed in Yuma, Arizona, which is 3 hours from home, which was not what I expected, but whatever. And then I went back to school at ASU. I graduated. I went to law school. I graduated from there, and then I practiced for a while doing.
You practiced law?
I did prosecutions in Denver, and then with the county attorney's office here, and then with the Arizona Attorney General. And then I went to do criminal defense work. And that's really where I came to appreciate the idea of fairness, right? Due process of law in representing individuals who were accused by the government. I saw a lot of good government actors. I saw some not so good government actors. And so what I thought about was, how does all of this work together? What's our system look like? And then, of course, last March when I saw voters not being treated well by a system that had eroded under its own stagnancy, I guess is a word. I'll just make it a word now. Then I was kind of moved. And I decided to run, and I think a lot of, well, at least more than not, folks agreed that I would probably be able to run the place better. And so I'm in office now. I've been there for about 6.5 months, 7 months, and we're having a good go at it.
And I'm sure you have future goals.
I do. I'd like to make sure that everybody gets a chance to vote and their votes counted, and we'll see what happens after
So
that.
we're going to focus civic engagements primarily on voting and other aspects. But Representative Blanca, just in a couple of minutes, a little bit more about yourself. We already know you were once a dreamer, but if you can elaborate just a little bit more.
So, what I can tell you and what has impacted my life is education for the most part, but literally came to the U.S. when I was 6.5. Lived in Oregon, lived in Wisconsin before landing in Arizona at the age of 10. I have, from the time of my teenage years, literally grew up in the area that I represent. I'm a Tempe High graduate. Yep. I am mom and first and foremost. So I was the first one in my family to go to college. Absolutely did not understand what that meant, right? Because there's still a lot of cultural disconnects.
Right.
And at that time when I was a college student, there was little to no support for first generation college students. And so, of course, I did everything wrong. And but from my lessons, I was able to really help my sisters navigate the college system. So I was the last one, even though I was the first one to graduate. I was the first one to go, last one to graduate. But nonetheless, I'm really proud because growing up in poverty with a lot of different challenges, like going to 9 different schools before graduating high school, and still being able to go to college. And when I talk about civic engagement, for me, it was just, it looked like being involved in my community, right? Just being a voice, going to PTA meetings. And as a woman, as a mom, a lot of times we take those things for granted. We don't see it as civic engagement. We just see it as doing a mom thing. But what I'm realizing is that's the first place where a lot of people really kind of begin. And unbeknownst to me.
It's amazing how you're talking about you, and then all of a sudden you're right away going to civic engagement.
Well, the thing
I wonder why.
I mean, it's the nature of our society. You can't live in this society without being engaged civically, at least to some degree.
Right.
And so I think we take these ideas and we disconnect them from our regular experience in everyday life, and that's absolutely not true.
Wow.
I think what we need
That's
to
a
do
great
is just
point.
recognize how being civically engaged is just being a regular person.
Exactly.
A regular citizen.
A
definitely.
regular citizen who is, and just the idea, because we use these fancy words. It's not just civic engagement. It's just, being a taxpayer, right? Going and voting, going to, like you said, the PTA meetings or your church meetings where you're doing things for the community or whatever. These are engagement.
We have to go on break. This is the end of the second segment, and again, I just love to see people that we can celebrate, and we have two with us. County Recorder, Maricopa County Recorder Adrian Fontes, and Arizona Representative Isela Blanc. We're celebrating you. You are amazing. Thank you so much. I said in one of the shows that when one understands the contributions, you usually say thank you for your service to people who went, serve in the military. But I always think that you also deserve a thank you for your service. So thank you so much. We will be right back. This is AARP, Arizona Hispanic Connection.
Welcome to AARP, Arizona Hispanic Connection. Educate. Celebrate. Connect. Arizona Hispanic Connection.
Thank you. Thank you for staying with us. This is AARP, Arizona Hispanic Connection, and the subject today is democracy, civic engagement, civic participation. We have Adrian Fontes. He is the Maricopa County Recorder. Isela Blank, she is an Arizona legislator, representative. And so let's kind of jump into the subject of civic engagement. I just feel that I did a little commercial ad during the week. I launched it through Facebook just to make people aware of what we're going to talk about. And in that ad, I say, now is our turn. That's what I said in that commercial. In other words, a lot of fighting, a lot of people fought for these ideals. People die, wars, and this and that. So now we have these concepts of democracy. Now is our turn. So how does it look like? So let's focus the conversation on voting, which is a big part of civic engagements, and then we can also touch upon some elements of legislation. How does civic engagements look like in the legislative process, in the voting process, and then in the community? Maybe at the third point, we can kind of combine and say community at the community level.
Sure. And the idea of voting, I think, has to begin, that conversation has to begin not so much with how, but why.
Okay.
Right? And the question of why. So I remember very vividly back during Desert Storm in the early 90s, that first time around, people were tying yellow ribbons around trees, right? Bring the troops home safe, support the troops, these sorts of things, right? That is a wonderful, sort of a wonderful expression of a sentiment of support, right? If we look back at the history of all of the folks who fought and literally died, all of the civil rights activists who were dragged through the streets, the suffragettes who allowed, for the fairer gender, if you will, to be able to cast ballots, what are we doing to honor those folks? What do we do every year on the on cycles and off cycles for school bonds and elections and these things? What do we do to honor those people? It's so easy to actually express that honor to those folks who gave their lives or who suffered and who fought and bled for your right to vote by casting a ballot.
Really?
That to
That's
me
the way,
is the why. That's
why.
That's why I talk about why you get. It's not so much because I think a lot of people talk about voting like, well, nobody's going to listen to you. Well, your voice isn't heard. Well, it's not about you, the individual voter. Your vote is a reflection of the suffering and the carnage and the terrible things that people went through so that you could vote. And by not voting, you're basically saying, I don't care about your suffering. And that's kind of inhumane.
When you talk to us at HLI, you mentioned a phrase that I don't think I can quote it, but something like, who do you think you are? Remember that kind of concept?
Yeah. It's the arrogance that we are promoting by saying, your vote matters and your vote counts. Like it's about the voter. And I think the right belongs to the voter. So you have a right to honor the past. You have a right to honor and prepare for the future.
That is
right?
powerful.
But you also have the right to be jealous and a little bit lazy and not be involved. You have that right.
Right.
So how does that going to reflect out of you? And when you see that expression in the vote as an honorific, if you will, right? Like you're lighting a candle at church type of thing, but not religious, right? This is a civic thing. This is how we express our citizenship.
Right.
And so when you see it that way, instead of as me, I think it's more powerful.
It is.
And so I think a lot of people that are messaging on this thing are doing it incorrectly. Now, as to the mechanics of it, how do you do it? Well, in Maricopa County, we're trying to make it easier for folks. You can go to the Secretary of State's website and at Service Arizona. You can register online to vote. You can register when you get your driver's license. You can do a lot of party shifting if you want and things of this nature. We're running as non-political an office as we can try to run at the county recorder's office because we serve all voters, right? So when you do decide, I'm going to go ahead and go vote, we're trying to make it easier. We were one of the first states to have online voter registration. We are one of the first states to really implement at a grand scale voting by mail. And we're moving that even further down the road, which is not inconsistent with what this office has done over the years. So, voting right now, it's about sign it, seal it, and send it, right? Because the ballot's going to show up in your mailbox.
Can you share some of the numbers that on vote, who's voting and who's not voting, et cetera?
Oh, absolutely. It's a stark contrast. So the idea of getting more people to vote means making it easier for folks, right?
Okay.
And if we look at the voter registration numbers right now, we're looking at somewhere between 69 and about 71% of our folks who are registered are on the permanent early vote list. That means they get their vote by mail, right? When we go to the turnout numbers, so the people who actually cast a ballot, that number goes up into the 80s.
Oh, wow.
And so what we know is that when you do what the folks out on the street want you to do, and that is mail them their ballot, they're more likely to participate. And I don't know anyone who wants less people voting who will admit to it. Right? I know some people who try to make rules that create harder times for people to vote, but I don't know anyone who will admit to it on the record and flat out say, I want less people to vote. Right? So because this is something that we take pride in, because bringing more people into this franchise of self-governance is something that's so important, the idea of making it more convenient for folks to do it so they'll have time to research all of these names and all of these propositions that are on their ballots, this to me is a better way to run our elections. And we've been moving that way for literally decades.
So you definitely recommend people to sign up to vote by mail?
I absolutely do think that that's the best way to go.
If somebody's registered but is not voting by mail, what's the process again?
Well, this fall, for jurisdictional elections, we're going to send everyone a ballot.
Okay.
Because it's the jurisdictions running the elections, not the state. And so we fall under those rules that the school boards want bonds or overrides, sanitation districts, water districts. We're going to send out just over 1 million ballots in the mail this fall. Not everyone in Metro Phoenix is going to get one, by the way. So if you don't have an election, you won't get one in Mesa. You won't get them in a lot of the northern parts of Phoenix and some parts of Glendale and other things like that. The vast majority, well, not the vast majority, but a big chunk of Maricopa County will get them. So when you do get that big envelope, open it up, read the instructions, look at your ballot, and you'll have time to go ahead and either bring it into one of our ballot centers if you don't want to mail it, or you can sign it and mail it. One way or another, we're making it more convenient. We're going to have longer hours. We're going to have these ballot centers open over the weekends so that working folks and folks with transportation issues will be able to get to them. We're really doing everything we can to improve the experience for the voters.
Latino voters, are they voting? Are they not voting? Any numbers on that?
Yes, they're voting and not voting.
Okay.
It's difficult because we don't have any way to identify a person as Latino.
Oh, okay.
We use statistical models to look at Hispanic surnames and things of this nature. But so for me to sit here and say yes, no, I'm guessing.
Okay.
Right? I know plenty of people from, like the Werners, right? The Werners are from Oaxaca, but their last name is Werner. So they're clearly Latinos, right? Because their family's been there for a long time. And then I know some folks named, Garcia and Lopez who are, as non-Hispanic as you can get just because they've inherited a name from many generations ago, and people change and things change. So generally speaking, I think the Latino population can get a little better at honoring those struggles from the past. I think they might be able to pay a little bit more attention sometimes to being able to do these things. And we, as a society, as a government, can get better at communicating with these folks as well, because that's a two-way street.
Right.
So while on the one hand, a lot of folks will say that population doesn't care, on the other hand, we have these issues of, well, are you doing anything about it, right? So we're looking at that balance right now, and we've got a lot of efforts in so far as community outreach is concerned.
Yeah.
And for some of the older folks in your audience who there might be one or two people that have seen a few trips around the sun, we are actually, I'll just mention this one last thing before you get to Isela. We just got from the Board of Supervisors funding for a new position for next March, which is a Special Elections Board Coordinator. This person will be very specifically going and coordinating with retirement homes, hospitals, VA centers, so that folks who are either immobile or have other kinds of physical incapacities that don't let them get out to vote centers or have actual physical problems voting, we will send a voting board out to these voters. Wow. So they can actually exercise their right and cast their ballot. So we're actually making it easier on as many fronts as possible.
Before we go on break, and then on the next segment, we'll come to Isela. Can you repeat the summary of how your argument for people voting? I mean, I've heard it several times. You already spoke about it in the beginning of your sharing, but can you repeat it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Your argument for people voting. What is it?
It is the exact opposite of what you usually hear.
Right.
Your vote is not about you.
Okay.
Your vote is about that person who died for that right. It is an honorific that you give to the revolutionaries who fought against King George. It's an honorific to the women suffragettes. It's an honorific to the folks who crossed that bridge in Birmingham. It's an honorific to, all of the folks who struggled and were beaten and were mauled by dogs just for the right to vote. And if you just give that up, essentially what you're saying is, I kind of don't care about all of that suffering. I just don't care. And that is very, very selfish.
That is a powerful argument, and it's amazing. Thank you for that.
You bet.
Yes. We're going to go on our last break, and then we'll come back to Representative Isela Blank to talk about civic engagement from a little bit of a different perspective, which is very related, and that will be on how can we participate in the legislative process, which is very similar to voting. But I feel like it's another step into the process. Thank you for being with us. We're going to go on our last break. This is AARP Arizona Hispanic Connection. We'll be right back.
Welcome to AARP Arizona Hispanic Connection. Educate. Celebrate. Connect. Arizona Hispanic Connection.
Thank you. Thank you for staying with us. This is our fourth and last segment of AARP Arizona Hispanic Connection. We're talking about democracy, civic engagement, civic participation, lots of ways to do it. And as was said earlier, it should become part of our lives. We just heard about the aspect of voting, registering to vote, etc. Now we move to the legislative process. Sometimes not that easy. It takes time, and people are busy, but we have to find the way. Representative Blank, can you share some thoughts of civic engagements on the line of legislative process?
Okay, so I do think that more people in 2017 have become even more involved. In fact, in the first couple months, because there was this kind of soaring interest in politics and what was happening at the state capitol, we had over 1,000 new people register on a request to speak system, which can be done online, or you have to go straight to the Capitol to do it.
The general website is azleg.gov, correct?
So that is the regular website, but so the request to speak system is an opportunity for anyone, any constituent, any person who wants to express interest in whether it's a bill, whether you're in favor or opposed to a bill. You can request, through the request to speak system, you can show, yes, I love this bill. And then you can also write why you love it or why you don't like it. And for us, that's a really powerful tool for the state legislators, right? Because we actually look at that information. I know I read the information, and it really shows what people are interested in. So as you know, we had a lot of citizen initiative things that we voted for.
Now, I think it's in this process, like my parents are 70, going on 80, 78 years old, and we grew up not voting. And then at some point, in the process, pretty much my whole family votes now. Even they vote, my parents vote. But to come to be able to speak regarding a bill, it's like let me just say it, kind of a long shot. Before you come to that point, a person has to kind of understand the system. So what would be some of the recommendations for people that are kind of new in this process before they can actually have the thought of, you know what, I'm going to go speak,
Yeah.
What are some of the things that leads someone to eventually dare to take that step?
Okay, so it really, for me, it started just being involved in my community, right? Like we mentioned, being a part of the PTA, going to school board meetings. It's as basic. But here's the thing, even I had no idea how to connect with my school board members, right? So if anything that they get out of this is just connect with your city council members, your school board members, with your state legislator, email them, write to them. It's easy, and it should be done, right? We should not feel intimidated by having those connections with the people who are representing us. And I think a lot of times, I know for me, myself, I felt like I was bothering them, like they were too busy to answer my questions. But at the end of the day, the reason we got elected was to answer people's questions. The reason we got elected was to represent people. So the first and foremost step is just simply know who your legislator is, know who your school board members are, know who your city council person, your mayor, and start emailing them, right? It could be on anything basic. If you don't understand why a discipline program is the way it is at a school, ask questions. And that's where we start. It's about really asking questions and finding out why are things happening the way they're happening.
Yeah, and interestingly, I think particularly for folks who have a little bit of experience, we make assumptions about the fact that our representatives kind of know what they're doing and understand the processes.
Right.
That's a dangerous assumption to make. And they're not too busy to have your input. In fact, they want your input.
Actually, part of this process is to educate legislators so that they understand what they're dealing with, the bills, etc.
Well, not only what they're dealing with, but they might not have the question properly phrased. They might not understand some particular technical aspect of something. There's a lot of people out there that have a lot of knowledge and information, and these guys can't expect it to be just like magically know everything, because they don't.
Right.
These folks are regular human beings like everybody else. They need that help, and if we as a society don't communicate with our school boards, with our legislators, with our government, if we don't get engaged, they're going to do it without us.
Extremely important aspect of civic engagements, communicating with your representatives,
Yes.
so that you educate them in
Right.
on issues. So coming to a very basic premise then, civic engagement could be as simple as helping your neighbor.
Yes.
But then you recommend that people understand who their representatives, their senators,
And we can just start there, right? We can follow them on
Is
Facebook.
it recommended that they make like a list? I've been wanting to do this for a long time, just to make a list of all my representatives and have them somewhere visibly.
Well, I think you might need the list at first because you don't know who these people
Right,
are.
right.
But then once you start developing those relationships, their names are going to just fall
Right.
off your tongue. Everyone knows Adrian Fontes, I feel, or almost everyone knows.
Well, we're
Adrian
working on that.
Fontes. Yeah.
And so then you make a list of everyone who represents you, board levels.
Well, and you can look at your voter registration card,
Okay.
because your legislative district, your school district, all
Right.
that stuff is listed on there. So you can. That's a really
But that
good start.
information's complex, right? And some of us really don't even understand the complexities of that system, right?
Well, I will tell you, I'll do this. I will get a little guide. Here's your voter registration card. Here's what it means. And then we'll just put up a little table online and so people can look up
That would be great.
that kind of thing.
Let me
tell my staff to do that right now.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
So Representative Blank, in your experience, you began to get involved with the PTA. So that's definitely recommended as much as
Right,
possible.
and it was getting to know my kids' teachers, right? Just even building that relationship at that very foundational level, and the principal, school's principal. A lot of times, parents are incredibly intimidated by school principals, especially like my family, my parents, because they didn't really understand the system, would have never built a relationship with the school principal, right? That is foundational in just civic engagement, just doing those things. And then once you start building those relationships and you start feeling more secure and then start to understand, because then you feel more comfortable asking tough questions. And then you feel more comfortable providing people in those leadership spaces a different perspective, right? Because when you're a parent, or when you grew up in poverty, or when you have experienced inequity, you can speak to those experiences, and sometimes people in those higher level positions may not understand.
And on that note, can you share of an experience where, as a legislator, once you got some education, either directly or indirectly, that shaped your way of thinking about a bill, for example?
So I'm going to share two,
Okay.
And it's related. So in 2010, the ethnic studies ban happened, right? Or they were listening to the bill. And I remember thinking about my legislators. I knew they were going to vote against it. But I felt so strongly about this. What I did is I actually wrote a letter. That was the first time in my life, 2010, that I actually had written a letter to my legislators about this thing. And it was a very personal letter. And so here's a person myself who has one foot in the door of civic engagement, and I did not receive a response back. And part of me, excused it like, oh, they're really busy, whatever. So one of the things that why that had such a huge impact is for me when I do get letters from people, from my constituents, and they're very personal. It's about their story, their experience. I do everything to try and get back to them. I'm not 100%, but I'm doing my very best. And in that, I tell them, I can only be as effective as possible, but I really need your help. And these are the things that I need you to do. And I actually give them a list of things that they can help me. Follow the bill, write to the chairman of the bill and all the people in the committee. So I actually give them steps because a lot of people, I didn't know that, right? If somebody had said, hey, we're actually going to have a committee hearing. If you have time to come or register on this request to speak system to share your opinion, these are extra steps because I, as a person, showed interest in that moment, right? Because it does take a lot of energy to write a letter to your legislator. I feel there are people who are, and yes, I see the same names a lot of times, and I know they're completely comfortable with the system. But how about those people that, for the first time, like me, 7 years ago, took the time and wrote this letter? So that had a huge impact for me.
The community or programs such as this one, I mean, I assume that we could potentially play a big role in educating because everything's about education. We have to understand processes, etc. So do you think there's a huge need to educate more on this, how a bill becomes a law, for example, the process of the bill, where it goes and when to intercept it, when to talk, when is a key point to talk to your legislator, etc. I assume that you would agree that we need lots of education on this.
I'll tell you this.
Okay.
I think there's a lot of folks out there who have the capacity and they have the time. They just kind of need that spark. And I think that there's a lot of things happening and a lot of stuff changing, and that spark is really starting to get out there and people are engaging. And the folks in power are feeling it. I mean, I was in Washington D.C.
Which is really good.
Which is really good
it's
in
awesome.
February, and I heard a couple of folks in the hallways complaining about how many calls they were getting, and it is as if the hard part was hearing their attitude towards it, but then the good part was, the folks are really making a difference.
Yes,
and so when
they
you
are.
contact them with the calls and all this sort of stuff, and Isela will tell you, folks are paying attention because guess what? They don't have a choice. They represent us.
So the best way to perfect the union is through civic engagement, we would agree?
Yes.
We definitely have to participate. The more participation, the more we honor the democracy and the efforts and the sacrifices of people that have paid a huge price for us to kind of enjoy this. But civic engagement has to be the key. And in order to perfect the union, we must engage in civic engagement.
Right.
Civic participation.
Making a Memorial Day post that says freedom isn't free and thank you, veterans. Don't thank me, vote.
And
Right.
for me, it's as simple as helping out in the classroom to as big
Right.
as writing to your legislator.
And this is an amazing thing about civic engagement. It's very broad and it's very
Yeah.
Right.
specific at the same time. It's very practical. It's very technical. It has different nuances. And we should just make it part of our lives.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, that was the goal of today's program. We wanted to encourage everyone who has joined this program to even, we obviously, our program is not enough time to learn about the history of democracy. We have internet nowadays. We have YouTube. Educate yourself on the process and the history of democracy. I think it's an amazing thing. And then we try to land in Arizona and today to make it very practical. Final words, we have just a few seconds.
Isela's amazing. She's got a great story, and frankly, I'm glad to know her, and I was glad to be a part of that first thing that got her into office, and I'm very grateful for all the folks that helped move this process forward.
Final words, Representative Blank.
Aquí estamos. Necesitamos esa chispa. We have to have that spark, and I
Right.
think it has been lit. So gracias, Adrian, and thank you so much, David.
Yeah,
well,
thank you, David.
I just want to say that one of the objectives of this platform is education, connecting, and another one is celebrating, and we celebrate all your accomplishments. County Register Adrian Fontes and Representative Isela Blank. This is all the time for today. Thank you so much. This was AARP Arizona Hispanic Connection. Have a good day.
Arizona Hispanic Connection.